Welcome to the Book and Ball podcast. My name is Ollie Sanders and I'll be your host for this short series where I will hopefully be able to give you a good rundown of the history of Cambridge United, a club which has been an underdog for most of its existence, both on and off the pitch. Now, this will be the first part of a three-part series where I will be analysing some of the key points from the history of United, as well as hearing from a fan of the club for over 50 years, and an exclusive interview with the legend that is Mark Bonner, where he discusses his role that he has played in the recent history of the club. Now, in this first episode today, I'll focus on the period from the conception of Abbey United to the crowning moment of election to the Football League in 1970. In this episode, I will aim to organise most of my discussions around the key theme of destiny. Was Cambridge United destined for the Football League? Well, hopefully by the end of this podcast, you and I will have a good idea of an answer to the question. So, let's get into it. So, before I delve into the origin of the football club itself, I think that it is useful to gain an idea of some of the origins of football in Cambridge. Cambridge is full of tradition, and this is no different when it comes to the sport of football. The game as we know it today has its roots intertwined with the city. In 1848, a group of students created the first 11 rules for football on Parker's Piece in the centre of town. These rules were almost entirely adopted by the Football Association for the original draft of the FA rules in 1863. The rules of football are a fundamental part of the game. After all, what is a sport without rules? It is clear that these students have had huge influence on the beautiful game. In fact, Parker's Piece is known by some to be the birthplace of football. Today, amongst the throngs of tourists and cyclists which take over the park, is a statue which lies in one of the corners. 4 pieces of stone have been put together and are engraved with the original 11 rules. Now, this statue was designed by Alan Ward and Neville Gabby and was put in place in 2018. But how does this link exactly to the club? Well, it is almost certain that United as it is today wouldn't be where it is without the university. Cambridge is known as a place of study where some of the best minds of the world research some of the most interesting and complex problems. The university has contributed to the club through funding and most certainly through ticket sales. However, it is often understated by how much of a deal the Cambridge rules are for the city and also for the club. Cambridge is known as being this place of striking architecture, of world-leading academics and an expanding biomedical sector, but not necessarily for football. This is something which the club is trying to address. In 2016, a long-term strategic partnership was developed between United and the Cambridge University Association Football Club, CUABC. Now, CUABC was created in 1856, just 7 years prior to the draft of the FA Cambridge rules, and is accepted by some to be the first official football club. Now, there clearly is this link which is trying to be formed between the two institutions, which hopefully should enable United to benefit more from the football heritage which lies on their doorstep. But I guess, how does this actually link to the Football League? Well, despite their heritage of football in the city, for many years there just wasn't this link between Cambridge United or its earlier form Abbey United. Being the birthplace of football did not guarantee success, especially due to the many long non-league teams during the earliest 20th century, including the university's own. There just hasn't been this partnership between United and the university for decades, meaning that in terms of destiny for the Football League, having the birthplace of football was not actually that much of a factor. Well, let's have a look at the club itself. Cambridge United, like most teams, has not progressed in one linear line. This works both off the pitch and most certainly on it. As I explained in the intro earlier, I'm going to try and answer some questions, or inquiries I guess, throughout the series. So in the next section, I'll be diving into the wider question of how the club was created and how this links into the history as well. So, first of all, like many clubs, Cambridge United has not always been known by its current name. The club was originally formed in 1913 and was known as Abbey United, hence the current stadium name. It was originally created by a few friends under a lamppost on a street in town. This seems to be a rather typical way for a non-league club to be formed, not in a formal or boardroom style environment, but in a place of the day-to-day working person. The club originally played their fixtures on Midsummer Common until, like most teams, their activities were paused due to the First World War. At the conclusion of the war, the club moved twice to Stourbridge Common and then again to Station Farm in Barnwell. Now, this pitch here in Barnwell gained infamous attention at the time due to how poor of a condition it was in. It was affectionately known as the celery trenches due to the nearby vegetable patches and the mud which covered it. Quite clearly a contrast to the modern day, where full-time groundsmen use the latest technology to keep a surface playable all year round, despite temperatures dipping below freezing in many weeks of the winter. Now, in 1930, the club tried to relocate to the previously mentioned Parker's Piece, but it was unsuitable for football in the long term, and they ended up only playing there for one season. As a result, they played on a plot of land off Newmarket Road. Now, I'm sure they didn't know this at the time, but this was to be the home of the club for the next 90 odd years to the present day. Now, in those days, obviously, there was no 8,000-seater stadium with towering floodlights over the pitch, just a humble ground for a non-league side to kick a ball around. Now, I think this sort of creation of a football club will, like many things in life, depend on multiple factors. In the case of Abbey United, I don't think this is an example of there being a gaping hole or a lack of a football team in Cambridge, but rather a team which some friends wanted to create for the love of the game. I think the ground hopping between the different areas of town is a good example of this. There wasn't a ready-made area for the team to play in. They had to scratch around to find somewhere suitable. There is something quite sort of romantic in football terms about a ground hopping team though. They've always been popular, with Bolton Wanderers for example starting off their life without a permanent home. It makes the club seem more normal, like an average team you can find up and down the country, and I think that ultimately this is what Abbey United was. But enough about off the pitch for a bit. Let's look at what really matters, the action on the pitch. The first game for the club was on the 22nd of November in 1913. It was played against MJ Drew's 11 on Midsummer Common. The match ended in a resounding win for the MJ Drew's 11, who won 7-0. So, overall, a tough start for life on the pitch for United. Pre-war, there are a few other friendlies recorded as having been played, before football was stopped till peace occurred. Moving on to 1921, Abbey United entered their first league, an important time. They played in the CAMS League Division 3, and in their first season, they actually romped to the title. Success was quick to follow in the next year, as the team won the CAMS League Division 2. Abbey United then managed a solid second place in the 1923-24 season, finishing behind St Ives Town. So, life in the lower echelons of non-league was appearing straightforward. A 1-2 punch of back-to-back promotions had seen them steam their way through to the top tier of Cambridgeshire football. This was clearly a strong start to life as a football club for United. They had worked their way out of the bottom league and found themselves slowly but steadily moving through the leagues at the bottom of the football pyramid. A few seasons of mid-table obscurity followed before the best run of form Abbey United has seen so far. The 1928-29 season was the most trophy-filled season yet. They won 5 trophies: the CAMS Challenge Cup, Crete Charity Shield, Chatteris Nursing Cup, Berrien District Cup and the CAMS League Division Cup. Wow, that must have needed some trophy cabinet. Calling this season a success must be an understatement. If you consider recent history, although it's not a perfect comparison, the most the club have won in a season is 2 trophies since 2000, winning the FA Trophy and Conference Playoff in 2014, a season which for sure will be visited in a later episode. Winning 5 trophies is impressive, and is a symbol of the platform which the team on the pitch had provided the club off the pitch, in order to develop, not just as a team, but as the club as well. I'm now going to move on to looking at the time period pre-Second World War and the kind of results which the club gained during this time. Now, this was a pivotal time. They needed to find some off-field stability, both on and off the pitch as well. Now, I've looked at the extremely successful 1928-29 season where 5 trophies were won. After this year, Abbey United moved away from the cellular trenches in Barnwell due to pitch conditions in 1930. I guess it's not really a surprising outcome, considering the reputation that this ground had gained for itself. As previously discussed, the club relocated to Parker's Piece, only for it to be unsuitable for a long-term base. In the one season played there, the 30-31 season, United finished second bottom. So, a disappointing season in the league. The only saving grace was that they ended up sharing the Chatteris Nursing Cup with Surham Rangers, a team still knocking about at Sunday League level. It's interesting to see how far United has come in a way, from playing teams that you can regularly still see playing in your local park, to lining up against Wayne Rooney and the scorer in a World Cup final, Angel Di Maria, who did punt the ball over Newmarket Road End, so there you go. Abbey United then did move to their permanent home on a patch of land they purchased off of Newmarket Road. This ground was opened with a friendly against the University Press. Now, to find another season of strong success, you need to skip forward to 1935 to 36. United won the Creek Shield and were losing finalists in the CAMS Challenge Cup. But the real success of this year came off the pitch. Incredibly, 2,000 people turned up at Cottenham to see the semi-final of the Cottenham Nursing Cup, a game between Haddenham Rovers and Abbey United. Rovers ended up winning 5-3, so a disappointing result on the pitch. But the support off the pitch was quite remarkable, given the number of people who turned up to watch almost just two village sides play in a village cup. The club was starting to move upwards off the pitch, reflecting the on-the-pitch growth which was also occurring. So, before a quick break in the episode, let's just summarise what I have looked at so far. So, on balance, I would argue that pre-Second World War, Abbey United, and hence Cambridge United, was not, destined for the Football League. There just wasn't much distinguishing the club from others, even in the local vicinity, let alone the country. Although there is some interesting background to the city and the Cambridge rules occurring, this doesn't overrule the fact that Abbey United was not special for many years and can't really be described as destined for the Football League. Let's take a break. Welcome back to the Book and Ball podcast. I wanted to take some time during this episode to look at the wartime club and specifically see if I could find and spread some individual stories from World War II. I did do some research into World War I to see if I could have a similar segment, but there was a lack of information about the players for the club during those years. Now, Abbey United were actually playing a game against Histon on May Day 1939, whilst at the same time Adolf Hitler was making a speech claiming he was a lover of peace. Well, that was clearly not how things turned out. After Britain declared war on the 3rd of September 1939, the government prohibited that all gatherings for the purposes of entertainment and amusement, whether outdoor or indoor, which involve large numbers congregating together, are prohibited until further notice. Luckily, this stance was softened, and wartime football soon returned to the towns and villages of Britain. It's interesting to note that wartime games tend not to be in historical playing statistics because of regulation from the government. This is because it was too risky for a large number of reports on Forces 11s because of the large number of RAF units in the Cambridge area. Now, the first competitions that Abbey United signed up for were the Cottenham and Willingham Nursing Cups. They ended up thrashing Willingham 5-0 in the first game, so football had returned with a bang to Cambridge. Now, during World War II, a lot of the teams which ended up playing against Abbey United tended to be military 11s. As a result, the occasional professional footballer in service would end up gracing the hallowed Abbey turf. This happened notably twice. First, on May 16, 1941, Alex James, a player who had actually turned out for Arsenal and Scotland, played for Hallen in a game against Marshall on Newmarket Road. And then perhaps even more notably, the great Dixie Dean, the holder of the record for the most goals in a season, played for the Lancers 11, who beat United 3-0. In a time of such struggle, to be able to see some of the best players in the country play in the city must have been a real treat for the citizens of Cambridge. Now, the war was felt most harshly on April the 22nd, 1943 for United, when, before a game against an RAF side, a silence was held for United player Len Johnson, who was unfortunately killed in action. Johnson played over 100 appearances for the club on the left wing after signing in 1933. This is a key example of the way the war affected every part of life in Britain, right down to the football teams. Now, I want to move on to looking at the time before United were elected into the Football League. One of the most notable moments which occurred in the history of the football club was the name change from Abbey United to Cambridge United in 1951. This name change coincided with Cambridge as a place becoming a city. Perhaps this was a move by the football club to become more synonymous with Cambridge, somewhere which most people across the country have heard of due to the university. It certainly represented a change of identity for sure, towards the football club which so many know and love today. The first manager appointed after this name change was Bill Whittaker. Whittaker was an FA Cup winner with Charlton and hence a more prestigious name in the game of football. In his first season with the club, the 1951-52 season, he won the CAMS Invitation Cup and Peterborough Senior Cup. 2 years later, United started to play in front of larger crowds. An FA Cup qualifying game against local rivals Cambridge City saw 11,908 turn up. And when United reached the second round proper for the first time, they played Bradford Park Avenue in front of 10,000. Now these are bigger crowds which would turn up today on an average match day, and show the growth of the club off the pitch. Now there have been some great players to play for Cambridge. However, there is only one who has been inducted into the National Football Hall of Fame, and that player goes by the name of Wilf Mannion. Mannion signed for United in the 1956 season. He was a forward who played with great pace and with great flair. Now Mannion's upbringing is particularly interesting. He grew up in the South Bank community of Middlesbrough. In Mannion's own words, from a BBC archive video from 1978, he described it as the most working class area in the most working class town. He grew up in an area shadowed by steelworks, where football was the only escape from industry. Mannion's love for the game was forged from his childhood. He belonged to a Roman Catholic community, where the only rival community was a football one. Now Mannion would play with any ball possible. He described how he'd go to the butcher's and he'd give us a pig's bladder, and we'd blow that up. He was eventually signed for Middlesbrough when directors came to his house. Quite a remarkable way to start your career for your boyhood club. However, his career was to reach a climax tragically too soon, and it was not to be on Teesside. Whilst playing for England against Scotland in 1951, Mannion, who was only 5'7", jumped, and a Scottish player hit him in the jaw with his head. It was to be the end of his international career. Now Mannion eventually signed for Cambridge in 1956 after weeks of speculation. He ended up playing for United after he was banned from playing in the Football League due to remarks he had made to a newspaper. But what the Football League lost, Cambridge certainly gained. Now, moving on to the 60s, in what was going to be the club's last decade in non-league till the noughties, a huge milestone was reached in the 1960-61 season. Having joined the Southern League South East Division 2 seasons earlier after ground improvements, the step to professionalism was the next logical leap for United to make. With professional players comes longer training sessions, more dedication to football, and ultimately more wins. For any club trying to reach the Football League, being professional is a must. In this first season as a professional club, United nearly won the Division 1 Championship. Despite not coming top, it was clear the march towards the Football League was well underway. Now, I'm going to end this episode by examining one of the most important moments in Cambridge United's history, the election to the Football League. Up until the mid-80s, the only way to gain access to the top 4 tiers of English football was to win a vote held by the members of the current Football League. The bottom 4 clubs in the 4th Division will be put up for election, and then several clubs from non-league would go up against them in a vote to try and reach the Football League. Now United had gone up for election in 1969, but only received 16 votes. They knew that if they were to gain enough votes, they must target the northern and western clubs more, who did not know enough about Cambridge in order to give them their vote. Bill Levers, who was United manager at the time, came up with the idea to host the chairman and board of clubs from First Division teams when they went and played Ipswich away, and Second Division teams when they played Norwich away. When talking about the northern sides, Levers said that, after all, what do the majority of them know about Cambridge United? I would say it's probably a fair assessment. Without actually showing other boards the essence of Cambridge, being relatively far away from the football heartlands of the north was always going to cause a problem for United. Levers' argument was that it would not cost a lot of money, but would sell the facilities of Cambridge to other clubs. Now, a similar scheme had already been in place at the Supporters Club, for visiting supporters to be entertained at Newmarket Road on a Saturday afternoon. However, supporters only have so much of a stake in a club. Anyway, the success of this idea was to be proven a year later. On the 30th of May 1970, Cambridge United were elected to the Football League. They received 31 votes and were elected by a majority of 14 to knock Bradford Park Avenue out of the league. John Woolley, the club chairman, speaking at the Football League annual meeting at Café Royal in London, called it a very great day for United. This sentiment was backed up by Levers, who said he was over the moon. Levers and his players received the news while staying in a hotel in the German town of Wesseling, whilst they were prepping to play Bonn in a friendly whilst on a pre-season tour. Now, alongside United, Darlington, Hartlepool and Newport were the other 4 teams to gain Football League status for the 1970-71 season. In the end, the result came down to who out of Cambridge and Bradford would receive more votes. When Bradford's count of 17 votes were announced, there were, and I quote, gasps of amazement from the United contingent. It was at that point which they knew they were going to play in Division 4 in the following season. Back in Cambridge, the champagne was flowing. At the Supporters Club, there were scenes of wild jubilation when the Supporters Club secretary, Harry Howe, received the result via telephone and yelled, "We're in!" to the waiting fans. In the afternoon, 100 fans hired a double-decker bus and lorry and paraded it through the town centre with placards showing the result. They then toured the local villages in the evening, so as many United fans as possible could know what had occurred. Now, the importance of this day for Cambridge cannot be understated. Election to the Football League gave the club a huge financial lift and a better status among England's football scene. It meant that the team were able to play against a better quality of opposition, whilst at the same time have a greater sense of security, knowing that they couldn't be relegated as easily due to the elected nature of the league at the time. If the club had not been elected that season, a poor run of form in the next would have severely challenged any subsequent election hopes. Well, there we have it. Election to the Football League secured. But what was to come next for United? Well, you'll have to listen to episode 2 to find out. But to wrap up episode 1, I'd like to link back to the idea of destiny. Perhaps you can look at the answer to this question in both long-term and short-term ways. In the short term, there wasn't really a destiny for the Football League. As I discussed before the break, there wasn't anything particularly different or special about Abbey United. However, if you zoom out and look at the long-term picture, the argument for destiny becomes stronger. The underlying factors of the city, alongside the players who played for United, and on-the-pitch success, suggest that the election to the Football League was always bound to happen. Thanks for listening.